Well, happy Saturday, folks. The real Captain Kirk here. It's the 18th of November. It's a beautiful blue sky day here at Bethlehem. Again, we're going to share with you some of our 2024 outlook and snowfall outlook and severe weather outlook. Some of the things we shared with JP Morgan client yesterday. So hang on to the end of this longer than normal video here today. One cycle that everyone's been harping about is El Nino. While strong, it is not the strongest by any stretch of the imagination. It's a strong El Nino, and it's probably peaking as we speak. Models left show that this thing is going to be a one-hit wonder here and collapse as we go through the winter, spring, summer season. By this time, summer next year, we're probably talking La Nina again, so a quick hit. This cycle is conducive to nor'easters, and we'll talk about that here at the end. One methodology meteorologists use that we're not a huge fan of and we do not use is an analog methodology. And simply put, you just line up climate indices like El Nino and PDO and AMO and solar cycles and other oceanic atmospheric type indices to project what happened in the past. This might be what happens this year. So again, not a fan of this methodology, but if you did that, line them all up today and what did it do in the past, you'd come up with 57, 1963, 65, and 1972. And what you got here is map left is temperatures, cold across the south and the east, and then warm in the northern plains, northwest, and the map right is precip, wet along the south and wet up the east coast, and dry in the plains and northern Rockies. So that's generally our year-ahead outlook kind of matches this. That's the only reason I showed it today is because it kind of agrees with what we had projected a year ago. Again, this is based off a 1961-1990 average versus the little maps are based off of the more current through 2020 average. So use the later averages. You got a little colder scenario here, but we like the theme of a colder south and stormier east in the south, and then warmer, drier toward the northwest. So again, always encouraging when the physics-based type of science matches up with our trillions upon trillions of statistical calculations. One thing that's way down here, again, this time last year, we were 85% of the country in dry to drought phases. This year, we're at 56%. Average would be about 50. All that drought you see from New Mexico, Texas, Gulf Coast is going to be vaporized here in the next 2 months. It's already started, so with heavy rain and a typical El Nino pattern. So that drought will go away, probably expands in the northwest, northern plains, northern Rockies as we go into 2024. And again, we'll talk in detail here about 2024 in a second. But so again, good news, we're projecting about 30-40% of dry to drought phases next year, which is a wet pattern. Very little of us with drought, again, other than the northwest. As projected a year ago, we talked about tornadoes being the most in 4 years. They were the most in 4 years. Unfortunately, next year, we're talking about the most in 13 years. Again, typical El Nino jet stream to the south, subtropical jet stream clashing with a polar jet stream, and cold weather all the way into May. You got a lot of tornadoes. Hail this year, while still below average, was the most in 11 years. So it was up 57%. We actually think that'll be up 15%, even more next year and above average. Wind damage, dumb luck or otherwise, again, just a lot of straight line wind damage was the most in 12 years and near record to some extent. So again, a very, very active wind damage year. We don't think that's as high next year. It's going to be more tornadoes and hail. But again, a lot of severe weather potential here. So some of what we shared with the JP Morgan folks yesterday, longtime client, just again, there's a lot of risk here with this type of scenario, the cycles. Winter storms, we do believe some ice storms across the south and obviously nor'easters up the east coast. That means more auto accidents. We didn't have that last year because it was pretty much snowless in the east last year. So we got about $10 billion in damage. Freeze is more aggregated, more toward May. We do have a very cold May, so we think there could be some crop losses, most in 7 years. Severe weather this year was $48 billion, most in 4. We think next year is even more, so $51 billion. So floods are not going to be droughts. Droughts will be less persistent next year. So drought leadens 5, floods most in 4. The big, huge category that's contributing to this huge number here of 288 plus billion in damages is hurricanes. Scenario is more like 2020, 2017. So we're saying 22 systems. This year had 21, but we had Idalia and a couple of Ophelia on the East Coast and Lee up in Maine, Nova Scotia. This year is probably bigger cities. It's more Texas, maybe Houston, Miami, Tampa, and Virginia Beach. So Texas is a real concerning area next year. South Florida is another area, and then lesser extent, Virginia area. So again, a huge number there. Wildfires we think will be late, more Pacific Northwest, Northern California, Northern Rockies. We do think that'll be an area of drought concern. So late next year, fall, that'll be maybe the most in 4 years. Add it all up, you come up with only about $68 billion this year, so a below average year. Average year, we'd have about $135 billion in damages over the last decade. So $288 billion is a lot, 2020 and 2017. Let's look at this week here again. Damages for retail seasonal sales for sure this week. Again, only 14.8 warmer than last year. This time last year was just freezing, cold and snowy, coldest in like 20 years. Not this year. So huge downward trends in seasonal sales demand. Drier, virtually no snow. Again, so these are very negative trends for retail sales, unless you were selling maybe in China, because China was actually the coldest in 5 years and below average. Looking at this week here regarding Thanksgiving. Now, there's a little misleading map here because there's some good news here for retailers, and they need it after a warm fall and a really warm week, obviously, last week. Looking at about 2.6 warmer than last year for this week, and warmest in 3, 12th warmest in 38, so not good on that front. Snowfall up a bit, but still below average, and rainfall up a bit and near average. The good news is if we dive into, again, how we help our big Fortune 500 clients is not only predicting the weather a year ahead by week, 32 million spots, that's every mile on Earth, but also telling them what the impact is on seasonal sales. We've done this 10,000 times for everything you buy at a grocery store or Target or wherever, predicting those seasonal sales. So let's key in on a critical period for them, Black Friday, 23 through 26. Now this is Thanksgiving Day through Sunday. Look at that cold. We've got some cold here in the U.S., so let's quantify that. Just knowing it's cold is one thing. Knowing it's the coldest in 10 years, 6.3 colder than last year. Apply that to our power of 1 degree technology chart, right, and rules of thumb. Again, we've got these for thousands of items, but one category that loves Black Friday and Christmas is electric bedding. It's kind of a gift category, and it's something folks mind this time of year. So cold as a 10, 6.3 times every degree colder, there's about a 24% bounce in electric bedding sales. Do the math, that's a 144% increase. This category is very volatile in the sense that it has 2 spikes, Black Friday and Christmas. So this is good news. They'll take it. They need it. Women's outerwear, again, about every 5 degrees, every degree colder, 5% increase in sales, 10 degrees colder, 50%. So again, about 32% for women outerwear. Car batteries, antifreeze, belts, all those front-end auto parts tend to start breaking in cold weather, up 25. Women like to feed the birds. We've proven that quite frequently with bird seed sales. Every degree, about a 3% or so bounce, so up 19%. And jeans, hot coffee, cocoa, hot cereal, pantry loading type items, up about 13%. So a good week for retail sales. The other good news here is this time last year, we were all sick. We had the epic flu season last year, one of the worst in 20 years, peaking in Thanksgiving. That's just very, very early. This year's the red line. Last year's the orange line. Again, map right is that, bottom right is the widespread severe flu. Again, Texas, the deep southeast was just off the scale. Map upper right is this year. So much slower start. Again, we think it's a dome season, probably peaks in January and trails off into March. So again, not the intense, huge spike where a lot of the population was sick. So that's good news for store traffic and people getting out and about. We'll go through the 6-day snowfall forecast here. Not much. Again, it's high elevation. New England maybe by Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then the system in the Rockies. But overall, again, 63% less than last year, 56% below average. About 29% of us maybe get some snow this week. But again, not a lot in terms of the actual amounts. Now, next week, getting into 2 December here, hard to believe, gets interesting. Again, this is showing some signs of a El Niño signature. Colder east, warmer west, but look at that track. Models are hinting, this is more Euro-based here on these graphics, but versus the GFS, but the Euro is suggesting maybe a deep south storm coming up the East Coast and just cold enough, maybe from those Appalachians to the central Pennsylvania Appalachians, Poconos, and definitely New England. So it looks like just inland of the big cities, maybe even here at 360's headquarters in Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. So an interesting week and a good week. 0.7 colder than last year, coldest in 3. Snowfall, while less, we'll see. That nor'easter could be interesting to boost the snow totals and a little bit drier. So this is a strong week for retail seasonal sales, and they'll take it again after this really hot week we've had. And we just aggregate the world 2-week outlook. Again, we see the colder areas in the Northeast Canada, Northeast U.S., Northern Europe, Eastern Europe, and Northwest Russia. Pretty warm everywhere else. And snowfall, generally in those same areas of Eastern Canada, Northeast U.S., and Siberia. So let's look at Christmas week. Again, we've shared this many months ago with you. But again, while we have some cooler weather at the beginning of December and the end of December, right around Christmas and beyond, the week before is not so good, and that's here right now. So last year, obviously, was the second coldest in the modern history of the world. It was freezing cold pretty much everywhere. Retail seasonal sales went through the roof, up 2, 3, 4, 5,000% increases for a lot of seasonal items. Not this year. So we'll quantify that weather again. Last year, nationally, it was the coldest in 22 years. This year, quite a bit warmer, 13 degrees warmer. Yeah, you do the math on that. That's times our power of 1. All those categories that do well here Black Friday, not so good. So electric bedding, a huge hit down. Women's outerwear down. Antifreeze down. Bird seeds down. Cough jeans. So again, down. Now, the good news here going forward is that we do have a very cold, not very cold, but cold late December, January, especially February into early March. So it's a long, cold winter season that we did not have last year. It was just record hot, pretty much January, February into March last year. So they'll make up these grounds, at a steeper markdown. So again, some good news as we go through the winter. Made you wait for about 10 minutes here to get to the snowfall outlook. Our clients have had this for quite many months now, but again, sharing it publicly today. Map upper left is this the snowfall trends versus last year. Blues are much snowier, yellows much less. Bottom map is versus normal. That map's a little bit misleading because all those grays pretty much in the northwest, northern plains are actually more yellow, near 25% below normal snowfall. So that's just on the cusp of not so snowy. The deep south track, east coast, is where it's, again, way above average. So overall, we're saying the most in 10 years, plus 17% versus last year, plus 12% above average. So a snowy winter, again, especially if you live along the East Coast. So again, a lot of exciting weather if you like snow. So with that, folks, I hope you enjoyed the longer video today, and we will be back here again this time next week.